Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right in today because we're talking about something literally all of us find absolutely fascinating: survival. What actually happens when the world as you know it just ends? How do we adapt? How do we rebuild from absolute scratch? Today, we're tearing down the mechanics of resilience. We're going to look at the exact step-by-step architecture of how the human spirit constructs a brand new reality right out of the ruins of the old one. It is a wild ride, so let's get into it.
So, the big question we're tackling is this: what does it genuinely take to rebuild your life when everything you knew disappears? To figure this out, we're looking at two wildly different but surprisingly parallel stories. First, straight from the source material after the silence, we have the incredible journey of Emma and Claire. These are two young women navigating a literal post-apocalyptic wasteland. And on the flip side, we have Michael. He's 45, and he's facing his own kind of apocalypse, the sudden, devastating end of his 15-year marriage. Now, I know what you're thinking. These sound completely unrelated, right? But stick with me, because the blueprint for surviving both of these scenarios is remarkably similar.
Okay, think about it like this. On one side, we have the ultimate macro collapse: environmental ruin, crop failures, totally empty cities. Civilization is basically just gone. This was Emma and Claire's new reality, a terrifyingly quiet end to the world. But then, look at the personal collapse. Michael's wife moves out, and in a flash, his entire identity is swallowed up by the overwhelming silence of an empty house. Whether it's the literal end of the world or the emotional end of your world, the shock is the same. Both of our survivors are suddenly hit with this extreme isolation, a deafening silence, and the total destruction of the reality they used to know.
Let's track Emma and Claire's journey over a 10-year span. What's absolutely vital to understand here is that for these two women in their 20s, surviving a full decade in a wasteland wasn't about being the biggest, toughest action heroes in the room. No, it was entirely about their capacity to adapt. It's a grueling timeline. They went from the initial shock of the quiet collapse at year 0, fought through a wildly dangerous new reality by year 5, and pushed all the way to standing in fields bursting with food by year 10.
Those first 5 years? Brutal. I mean, adaptation was literally life or death. As a young couple traveling alone, Em and Claire were constantly running into hostile men who saw them as easy targets to exploit. So what did they do? They developed incredibly strict security protocols. Rule number 1, never travel alone. Rule number 2, always have multiple escape routes mapped out. There's actually this one time they managed to calmly slip away from a very dangerous group simply by taking a pre-planned emergency exit. They didn't fight, they evaded. They survived by replacing trust with intense, non-escalating preparation. Now, while Emma and Claire are dodging physical threats in the wasteland, Michael is lost in his own internal wilderness. His initial reflex? Just suppress everything. He tried to outrun his grief. He lost interest in his hobbies, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. He just tried to stay constantly busy. But, and this is a massive takeaway from the source material, trying to shove down that pain actually backfired. It made his situation so much more dangerous, and the sadness just grew stronger. He had to learn how to turn around and actively face his threats, exactly like Emma and Claire did.
To pull himself out of this, Michael had to build his own survival gear, a psychological recovery toolkit. Just like Emma and Claire mapped out those physical escape routes, Michael had to map his mental health. He started journaling, just 15 minutes a night, to actually process the grief instead of ignoring it. He brought in cognitive behavioral therapy, practiced mindfulness to stop spiraling and stay in the present moment. And maybe most importantly, he practiced self-compassion. He started treating himself with kindness instead of harsh criticism. These were the non-negotiable steps he needed to stabilize his life.
Let's talk about one of the heaviest hitters in that toolkit: cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Michael used this exact evidence-based technique to short-circuit his own catastrophic thinking. So when his brain would scream, "You're never going to be happy again," he would literally hit the brakes and ask, "Wait, what actual evidence do I have that this is true?" And then he'd reframe it. He'd tell himself, "Okay, I am hurting right now, absolutely, but healing is possible." It is such a brilliant, practical way to take back control of your own mind when your whole world feels like it's crashing down. Shifting back to the wasteland, Emma and Claire eventually stumble upon an absolute game changer: an abandoned farm. Now, it wasn't pretty. We're talking broken down fences, dry wells, the whole shebang. But they saw the potential. they saw a priceless opportunity. So they got to work, grinding from sunrise to sunset. They repaired windows, reinforced doors, built these incredibly smart hidden storage areas. Step by step, they turned a ruined piece of property into a legitimate safe haven. They finally stopped running and decided, right here, we're planting our roots.
But wow, the learning curve was astronomical. Remember, before the collapse, Emma was a graphic designer and Claire was a vet assistant. Farming? They literally knew zero about it. With the local wildlife gone and no livestock left, they were huddled over old, scavenged library books every single night, just trying to figure out how to grow food. And yeah, their first crops completely failed. Total disaster. The second try? Failed too. But they absolutely refused to quit. They learned how to compost food scraps, collect rainwater, save seeds, rotate crops, and build raised beds to fix the drainage issues. And it paid off. Their patience eventually exploded into a massive harvest of lettuce, carrots, potatoes, and peppers. They achieved total self-sufficiency.
And right here is where we hit this incredible thematic parallel. Emma and Claire had to master external sowing. They had to endure all those dead crops and failed seedlings before finally seeing that rich harvest. At the exact same time, Michael is practicing internal sowing. He knew he desperately needed physical exercise to help his mental state, but man, early on, just taking a short walk around the block felt impossibly heavy and painful. But he pushed through it. Those painful walks turned into jogging, and that jogging turned into a rock-solid routine that genuinely lifted his mood. Both of these stories hit the nail on the head. If you want real growth, you have to endure the pain of those early failures.
Back at the farm, as the crops started thriving, something really beautiful happened. The farm started acting like a magnet. It attracted other survivors, and they began building a true community of resilience. It all kicked off when they made the choice to feed a starving teenager instead of chasing him away. After that, an elderly woman joined them, then a father and his young daughter. And here's the kicker. Emma and Claire never tried to be warlords or rulers. They just shared their knowledge, shared their tools, and established a space rooted 100% in cooperation and mutual respect. It became widely known as a sanctuary, a place where intimidation and harassment were strictly, absolutely not tolerated.
And just as those two women were building a new society out in the ruins, Michael was purposely stepping out to rebuild his own social community in this city. He stopped waiting for life to just magically get better. He took action. He reached out to old friends for coffee, got back into sports, joined a photography club, signed up for a cooking class. He even started volunteering at the local community center. He had this massive realization that a meaningful life and meaningful connections still existed outside of his old marriage. He just had to be intentional about going out and finding them.
But you know, progress is almost never a straight line. Emma and Claire's peaceful haven was about to face its ultimate test. A hostile, heavily armed group of survivors caught wind of their thriving, resource-rich farm. And this group, they made a fatal assumption. They figured a community built on fairness and respect had to be soft. They thought it would be an absolute breeze to just roll in, intimidate everyone, and take over. It was a terrifying make-or-break moment that threatened to wipe out everything they had spent years building. So how on earth did they survive this without it turning into a bloodbath? By choosing preparation over confrontation. Emma and Claire had spent literal years planning for this exact nightmare. They had active communication networks set up, guarded observation posts, flawless emergency evacuation plans, and food stashes hidden in multiple secret locations. When those armed guys showed up, they took one look around and realized, uh-oh, this isn't a soft target at all. This is a highly organized, totally united front. Because they couldn't just bully their way in, the hostile group backed off and moved on. Not a single shot was fired. Preparation was their ultimate shield. Which brings us to the payoff for both of these incredible journeys. 10 years after the world went quiet, Emma and Claire are standing side by side, looking out over these vast, beautiful fields packed with food and life. They realized that the end of the world was actually just the opening page of a brand new chapter. And, in a very similar way, 2 years after his marriage ended, Michael is looking back at his life with this profound emotional awareness, deep resilience, and a completely renewed sense of hope. Both of these narratives prove something pretty amazing. Sometimes, surviving the absolute end of something is the exact requirement for building something profoundly beautiful and new. And that brings us to this incredibly powerful thought from After the Silence. Sometimes the seeds of a better future are planted in the ruins of the past. Think about that. Whether you are dealing with a massive external crisis or an intensely painful personal loss, survival isn't just about weathering the storm. It's about learning. It's about adapting. And ultimately, it's about taking the soil that's left behind and planting something entirely new. So look at the ruins you might be standing in right now and ask yourself, what seeds are you going to plant today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. It's been awesome. Keep learning, keep adapting, and I will catch you in the next one.